We as teachers sometimes get into this mode of, I'm here, I've been doing this, I know what's happening, why should I try to change? But I think it's important for us as educators to think that we need to be teaching beyond the classroom. It's not just the students that we're trying to help, but we need to minister to the entire family.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
Welcome back for this week's episode on the Teacher Edition podcast. It's a privilege to be with you, and I really do appreciate you giving of your time to join us. Before we jump into today's topic, I wondered if I could once again ask a favor of you. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you take just a minute and go like, follow, and even rate us on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on? Your feedback is so helpful to us. Yes, to us, but it's also helpful to others finding the show. Also, following or subscribing to the show is going to help those episodes drop right there where you can quickly get to them so you won't miss out on one single episode with our fantastic guests. Just reach up right now wherever you are on whichever platform you're listening or watching on and click that follow the show button. Don't forget to go follow us on social media. We're Teacher Edition Podcast on Facebook. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast, you can also jump over to YouTube and catch the videos of these interviews. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Teacher Edition Pod. Lastly, we're looking for your questions. I know I say this often, but we really are. For a new selection, we need a whole new stash of questions to share on the show. So if you have something that you're wondering about, maybe a topic you'd like us to share, or you're even looking for some ideas in a certain area, just take a minute, visit our website, teachereditionpodcast.com. There you can subscribe to our emails, read more about the podcast, and you can also submit your questions. These are questions that we share at the end of episodes as they come in, so you'll want to be sure to check that out. It really is just a simple click of a button and you can record your question. As we get today's episode rolling, let me introduce you to our guest. I'm so excited to have Curtis Tomlin joining us today. Curtis currently serves as the administrator of Hidden Treasure Christian School in Taylor, South Carolina. He has an undergraduate degree in music education and a master's degree in education. He and his wife have been serving in Christian education for about 30 years. God has given them a vision and really a ministry to help struggling traditional schools build up their programs, as well as help them to begin a resource program, which is so needed, we know that, but a program that would work best in their educational needs. Curtis is also a musician. He plays several different instruments. He and his wife have 2 adult children. Curtis, it is a privilege to have you joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, so let's start out by talking a little bit about your story. We often do this here on the podcast because it's great to hear people's stories and how God has led them along. I mentioned in your bio that you are serving at Hidden Treasure, which is a Christian school for students with special needs. I also mentioned that you and your wife have a burden to help traditional schools build a resource program. Special education is a special calling. We know that, and definitely an area where we need more educators. I wondered if you could start out by just sharing what led you into the area of special education.
Well, as I think back over the years of educating students, I think I always had a connection with kids who had special needs because I too struggled with reading comprehension in elementary school. It wasn't until I was actually in my first job before I was in college that I was working with a lady who had 2 boys with Down syndrome. So it was my first really up and close and personal connection with them that led me to fall in love with kids who have special needs. And so when I went to Bob Jones University, I majored in education. Never knew that this is what God would lead me into, of course, 30 years ago. But what ended up happening, I had to teach 6th grade. And as you teach Christian schools, you understand that you teach what they tell you to teach.
That's exactly right.
And so I had a young man in my class who was having seizures. He'd fall asleep with his eyes open, and then he'd have these seizures. And I was burden for him because I knew he had dyslexia, but I couldn't diagnose it. So I went to my administrator and I said, hey, can I help him with his spelling list? As you know, our spelling lists for Christian curriculums are about 30 words each. And I knew he couldn't do it. So I asked him to lower the limit down, and believe it or not, he wouldn't let me. And that kind of made me sad. But I just kept pursuing it as a teacher, and I kept asking, and finally they let me. And I started seeing this young man do much better in school. But it was a couple weeks later that we were in a staff meeting, and a gentleman that was also teaching at the school sat across from me, and that young man's name was brought up. And that other teacher said, oh, that young man, he'll never learn.
Oh, dear.
And I think I walked away from that meeting pretty upset. And at that time, I was already training in administration. And I remember telling my wife, if I ever get into education as an administrator, I don't want to hire a teacher that doesn't think a kid can learn.
For sure.
And so here we are years later, but my wife actually went back to school in her late 40s and decided to get a degree in special education because she had also taught, and she had been my secretary for 15 years. And she was saddened by the fact that we as schools were turning away students who had special needs because we didn't have a program. And so she came to me and she said, what do you think about me going back to school to get a degree in special education?
Good for
And I
her.
said,
That's
I think
tremendous.
it's amazing. I think you should go. So she did. And as soon as she graduated, that we just fell into this position here at Hidden Treasure. But I look back and I think God was preparing us all along by giving us opportunities to have students in our classrooms, to be able to lead programs that had special needs. And so we're very thankful that the Lord led us.
Wow. Yet another story of God leading all along the way. And as I say so often, you never know what God's doing today to prepare you for tomorrow. And obviously, so many examples right there of that. So you've been in Christian education now for a while. No doubt you've seen a lot come and go. You've seen the ups and downs. I know you have a strong burden for Christian education, but what would you say is one of the things that you are burdened most about in Christian education?
Well, I think that we as teachers sometimes get into this mode of, I'm here, I've been doing this, I know what's happening, why should I try to change? But I think it's important for us as educators to think that we need to be teaching beyond the classroom. It's not just the students that we're trying to help, but we need to minister to the entire family.
Okay, so I want to loop back to something you just said right there. I don't know, loop back too far, but something you just said was teaching beyond the desk or teaching beyond the classroom. I think you picked that phrase pretty intentionally. So I wondered, can you unpack that just a little bit more? Because I think that's key. We often get in, we have to get our lesson plans done. We have to finish, this, and this today. But it sounds like we need to go further than that. So can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. I believe that as educators, it's more than just the lesson plans. It's more than just getting the grades in. It's making those phone calls. It's making those connections. It's partnering with parents. I believe, our biblical responsibility is to come alongside mom and dad and assist them in what God gave them the responsibility to do. And so how can we do that better unless we partner with them? And I mean, I think working with special needs kids has really taught me to really dive into my curriculum, to teach beyond what the curriculum says, to have my students up and moving and collaborating and having them ask their parents questions. My role as an educator is ministering to the family. So I've got to be in touch with those parents. And that means even if there's an issue that takes place in class, I've got to be communicating that ahead of time. And we've always heard that saying, nip it in the bud. We have to do that ahead of time. And so that means I have to have a partnership with them. There's not really a hierarchy, if you will, of I'm in control and I teach your kid and you have to do what I say. It's a partnership with them where I'm moving with the student.
Absolutely.
it's not just one directional, and I think that we as educators can sometimes get into that mode or that stage of this is where we're at and we shouldn't have to do anything. But it's that authentic connection that I think that I'm looking for. It's that transparency, the immediate, even if I did something wrong, you are right. I am so sorry. Let me fix that for you. Um, it's understanding parents' cultures. It's understanding that this is a shared responsibility, that I have to do my part and I have to help my parents maybe sometimes learn how to do their part. So I think that's what I think of when I think of teaching beyond the desk. It's more than just the basics school requirements.
That's so right. And often we can just get focused on the students since they are sitting right there in front of us. And whether by oversight or by trying to avoid potential conflicts, maybe by talking to parents, we're omitting the most vital part of the partnership. And you mentioned that, the parents is supposed to be teamwork, and that teamwork is so important. And a school's culture really plays a vital part in that relationship. Do parents feel welcome? Are they a part of this? Or are they just, you need to drop and go type thing? We've been at schools like that. You know how that feels. What are your thoughts on all this? How do you think a school's culture affirms, I guess you could say, the calling of the parents, who they are, and really
Sure.
shapes every sphere of life?
Well, I mean, it really goes back to the Bible. God's word tells us to raise children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, or the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. God's word says often in the Old Testament that we're supposed to teach the Bible at home, at where you go, in the schools, in the churches, when you walk along the road, when you lie down. It also says, wear it about your neck, put it up in your house. And I know that I've been even talking with my high school Bible class about that, that's because eventually one day those parents aren't going to be there and these students have to make these
So
wise
true.
choices.
Yeah.
And so I think the culture of our schools has to be that partnership. We're not replacing anybody. I'm not replacing mom and dad. They're the primary spiritual leaders, or should be the primary spiritual leaders. I think we're there to equip. I think we're there to encourage parents um, in their family worship. I know that I've spoken with several families in the last week here about their family worship and their time of prayer together. I think we also have to honor their family vocation. There's so many diverse callings within our schools,
Sure.
especially with our parents. How can they be a testimony in their own workplace? Or, you know, maybe a parent gets to share with me their testimony. I had a former student come by the other day and actually shared with me their testimony of what Hidden Treasure did for them. And
Aw.
to me, that's a blessing. And, you don't get those all the
Absolutely.
time.
No.
So to be able to have that cultivated trust that was built here or at any Christian school, that transparency that help parents feel respected and they feel included in decisions. And even my wife, who's a teacher, will send an email or a text home at night and say, "Hey, we're going to do this next week, or in a couple weeks, we're going to make sweatshirts. And would your student like to participate in something like that? Let me know by a thumbs up or a thumbs down." Just including the parent and not just deciding these things on your own and just be like, "Oh,
Right.
well, it's just $20. Who cares?" Um, and sweatshirt's not $20, but just an example. But I
Yeah, the
think
whole idea of including them.
yeah, I think we have to integrate our faith into all spheres of education, whether it be encouraging the parents to live their faith outside of their home. It's difficult. So many parents come into our offices, as a former principal, that they come in your office and they're like, "Oh, my workplace, da, 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 da." And what's my role? I'm supposed to be encouraging
Yeah,
them to be a testimony in their workplace. And I think what we as educators need to do is to reinforce the school's mission to support that. And one of the things that we focus on here is that Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and favor with God and favor with man. So we're going to focus on the spiritual. We're going to focus on the mental or the academic. We're going to focus on, the world likes to say the emotional. We're going to focus on the social. It is important that kids know how to interact socially.
for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's also going to be important for them to also be able to interact physically. So that's why schools have phys ed programs and different sort of exercises, or like for our school, Special Olympics, is to increase that area for them. So Um, I want my children, my own personal children, and for my students to glorify God in their lives. And I think that's key.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, let's keep down this trail of
Okay.
parents
Okay.
and talk more about that relationship with parents. So maybe this is a unique question, but does the school have a role in equipping parents to reflect Christ? So you kind of mentioned it a little bit. You talked about when they come in, they talk about their jobs, and maybe you talk to them over email, or maybe you see them in the store, and you have
Mhm.
those opportunities where they're talking about their life,
Sure.
maybe even their own jobs. Do we have an opportunity there? Again, we often get so focused on the students, but what about the parents? How can the school help the parents even as they reflect Christ out and about and in their own workplaces? What are the opportunities there, do you think?
Sure. I think, well, the student, when they sort of come into your building, they sort of like kind of, I don't, they don't take the place of, but they sort of like, if you will, represent the main frame of the home,
Sure.
like the house. Well, those people that all interact within that house are sort of like my church's congregation and my role as a minister in my church. So as an educator, I'm ministering to the child who is then going to take that home, but then I've got to think of their parents as my audience, my congregation. So I think, in encouraging our parents that, whatever they do, do it heartily as unto the Lord. I know God's word says, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works. Um, Parents are called to raise their children. If someone comes into my office and says, here, raise my child, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to partner with you. And so I think our role is not replacing parents, but equipping them and encouraging them and inspiring them. So, yes, Jenny, that is our role as educators to equip parents to reflect Christ in their workplace. And that may mean integrating faith into their work, which is hard. We know what teachers are permitted to do in public schools. Um, they have to demonstrate Christian values. I mean, humility's hard. Integrity is often questioned in the workplace. Um, Equipping parents with a biblical perspective, such as providing workshops and devotionals. I know my wife and I listen to an online devotional every morning on the way to school. It takes 15 minutes of our time. So I stepped out with my Bible class, which is, I have 19 students, and I sent that link to all of my parents. And I said, this is something that would be great for you to listen to first. And then if you feel like sharing it with your kids, then do so. Obviously, there's
That's
sometimes things
wonderful.
that are just for parents, but lately there's been a lot of things that are great for students. And so that whole life discipleship is not just happening in the classroom; it's happening outside in the homes.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic because often we think, they're buzzing in and out of the office to drop off a lunch or pick up something, and we don't often think about those little opportunities to interact with them. We want them to leave happy, and sometimes we need to think even more about that. Like, what is their experience just walking in the office? But for them to be able to walk away encouraged in their walk with the Lord, or maybe they've had a rough day at work and they had to leave to come drop something off, and we have that opportunity to speak into their day and refocus them on the things of the Lord. I think that's fantastic. I'm so glad you said that. Okay, so I'm thinking down this line even further, when
Sure.
you attend a family conference or maybe a
Okay.
parenting conference or even a spiritual growth conference, often speakers talk about values. So values are very important. They apply broadly. And while we teach them, it is just as important that we model them. So I wonder if we could talk about that for a few minutes because we're kind of talking about being an example to the parents
Sure.
and to the students. What are your thoughts on that? How can we as educators model those Christ-centered values, both in the classroom and to parents, really?
Wow, Jenny, that's so important. I that's got to be number one on our list, even more so because that's our mission as Christian schools is to help young people make Jesus Christ Lord of their lives. So how are they going to do that if we don't reflect those values ourselves? So I think, in I was thinking of the terms like integrity and excellence. Those are things we look for in the classroom. I look for those things in my teachers. And, I encourage them to work diligently. I encourage them to work honestly. that all of our tasks, including the ones our students do, are unto the Lord. Let all things be done decently and in order. And I think of that word integrity, and my parents instilled that into me all my life. Integrity. I think of compassion and grace, especially in the area of special needs. I treat students with patience, with empathy. And let me just tell you, after 26 years in the Christian schools and then moving into special ed totally, I had to slow some things down a little bit.
Sure.
I had to give a little bit more empathy than I was used to giving. Um,
It's a whole
I
different
had to
world.
reflect Christ more,
Yeah.
and I had to actually ask God every morning for, Lord, give me more love for my students. Give me more compassion, extending forgiveness to our students, second chances. I always think of that phrase, you know, what, where would I be if God hadn't given me a second chance?
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah, students are going to make mistakes, but I think sometimes we forget that they are students, that they are teens, they're in their growing years. And I think we all know the difference between I did that was a simple mistake, and okay, that was a foolish mistake, or that was a scorning mistake, as Proverbs tells us. But I think extending that forgiveness and giving second chances, wow, what a way to model Christ-like values, and servant leadership. I use that even with my teachers. It's not about us ordering teachers around. For me, it's like, hey, let's do this, and I'll do it with them. The same with the classroom. If we lead by serving, we put the students' growth and well-being above our personal recognition. I mean, you've been educating a long time as well, and that great thing when they walk across that stage to receive that diploma or that certificate, and you're just so proud, and it's a good type of proud. Um, and it brings tears to my eyes because I know what that student went through. I know that may have been the student that was struggling. I had a student a few years ago. Her parents actually introduced themselves to me before I met the girl, and they said, "You're going to know our daughter before you'll know us, really. So we're introducing ourselves to you." And it took one full year of just constant going back and forth with this young lady, and I just kept praying for her and kept putting the Bible in front of her. And last summer, she got saved.
Oh,
And
wow.
you
That's
know,
wonderful.
but it takes a whole team of us to pray for it. It's not just me praying for it. It takes even our people who are supporters or our prayer warriors, all praying for God's will to be done in that student's life. But if these kids in our classrooms and our parents don't see it first in our lives, why would they want it? And so I think it's humility in our decision making. Like even when a student says, "Hey, Mr. Tomlin, you spelled that incorrectly," we get in a hurry when we're writing on the board, or we may pronounce something incorrectly. And if the student says, "Hey, it's actually pronounced this way," thank you very much. It's it's just moving forward with it and not really, don't correct me, in class. It's giving them respect. It's giving them that dignity that, regardless of their background or their ability. Jenny, I could probably like wax eloquently here a little bit. These are all things, not that I'm putting out that I've learned, like I know already, but these are things that I'm learning on a daily basis.
Sure. We all are. Yeah.
Praying regularly for my students and for my parents and letting them know that. Oh, that's definitely modeling Christ-centered values. And I try to remind myself of pray for your students, pray for your good ones. Don't just pray for your ones that are struggling. Pray for your one because you want them to all to be working together in the right way. And I think when we do that, then there's this community and collaboration that comes in where we're able to work with those parents and they're accepting of what we have to share with them because we've already made that pact with them or that connection of, hey, I'm on your team.
Right.
I want to
Yes.
work with
You
you.
built
And
that
so
bridge. Hmm.
seeing our students as the body of Christ and even our school families as the body of Christ, and it's our job to love them through that. Um, I think there's nothing that can beat that. And so I think, your question about Christ-centered values is so important, and it should be really on the top of our list as educators.
Yeah, I agree. And I love how you said, like, we expect to see these values in students, right? We're pushing them towards that. We're helping them to grow in that area. but even more importantly is that we're modeling it to them. We can, like you just said, we can't keep expecting of them and we're not doing it ourselves. I love that. We have to live it before them as well, not just expect it of them. So really, really good reminders. I love how you said also to pray for the students who are doing well and not just the ones that are struggling. So often all our attention goes to the ones who are struggling or the ones who can't behave or whatever's going on. But we need to pray for those who are doing well. They often don't get
Absolutely.
much attention because they're in class, they're doing great, they're doing exactly what they need to. And so that was a really good reminder too. Okay, so as we wrap up this episode, I wondered, one last question, if you had any other thoughts on just helping families. And since quality time is so important and we kind of touched on a little bit, maybe we can go down that path. Is there anything that a school could do to really encourage children and their families to just spend quality time together? This is a lost art these days.
Sure.
Families are so busy. They spend so much time dashing to events and practices and all of that. That just isn't conducive to quality family time, sharing and talking. We talk a lot about, even in this episode, not just trying to barrel through those lessons, but taking time to talk with the students and mentor them and grow them. And we talk about that probably in almost every episode at some point, on this podcast. But I wonder what your thoughts are on that. Is there anything that the school can do to really encourage families to spend that quality time together, hopefully for the purpose of engaging those conversations that are going to point them towards Christ? What do you think?
Oh, another good question. I think that there are obviously probably a plethora of things that we could do. Things that come to mind first are probably providing some resources like family devotional names, like devotional titles or things like that. Providing opportunities for your men to come in and your fathers and to have like donuts with dads or muffins with moms. And again, those are all colloquial things that a lot of schools are doing, but it's for us. And when we do a breakfast with our parents, it's not just about like coming in and eating. It's about fellowshipping and it's about understanding everybody's story, especially in special needs. Sometimes it's good to hear that you're not the only one that's dealing with this.
For sure.
And I
Yes.
think as even in the traditional Christian schools, we can do more of ourselves to do things like that, to have like family game nights or family worship nights or community service opportunities where we're going to go out, like when we do our big fall festival or when we do our spring skating night or something, to get the families out together. Or one thing that I've really wanted to do, and I think I'm going to start a second semester, is called conversation starters in communication. Like, hey, mom, dad, where did you see God's goodness today in your job?
Great
Or
idea.
I know that's been really big on my head. I didn't know you were going to ask that part, but um, how can you show Christ's love, or how did you show Christ's love today at work, mom? And, those are easy questions for those of us who have parents that work in Christian ministries. But I think that people would be surprised that even in Christian ministries, we struggle as well to maintain that, like, ah, that, that coworker annoys me, or they did this, but there's an opportunity to have a conversation and to encourage them and to pray for their coworkers. Parent-child retreats. I hear of Christian schools doing these things, camps, father-son camps, weekends, celebrating milestones, like what if a student gets baptized in church or confirmations. I know when I was in a traditional school setting that we would have students that would come from their music lessons and would play in chapel, and we'd invite the parents to come, and then we'd take pictures and then put it on social media. And I think, Jenny, even our social media interactions need to be representing Christ, and we have to be
Absolutely.
careful what type of phrases. I manage ours, and I'm even careful. I'm trying to be careful. What do I put on our Facebook page that is representing Christ as well as our church ministry, because we are a part of a church, and not every Christian school has a church associated with it. So um I think we there are lots of different things we can do.
Those are great. Those are Absolutely excellent. And I think kind of an overarching theme, I heard of that. It kind of goes back to what we already talked about with culture. It's the culture of the school. And I love how you gave so many ideas for how you can provide that quality time for them to be together because, they may not be doing it outside of school. So this would give them opportunities within, the school setting. But it really comes back to that mindset. And you mentioned it several times, kind of woven through there, of you're giving them that time together, but it's to bring about those conversations. It's to give that connection time. And that kind of, again, streams back to the culture of the school. What are we doing? Why are we doing this event? Is it just to raise money and then get out of here? Or is this really to have a time where people are getting to know each other? People are encouraging each other. Like you said, hearing each other's stories. And it is, we know as educators, you go to a conference and someone shares something that's like something you're dealing with and you think, hallelujah, somebody else is dealing with this. And so I love that mindset that you mentioned of just a fellowship, enrichment, encouraging time together, not just, get in, check the box that I visited my child today. So I think that's great. And kind of goes back to that whole conversation we had about culture. Curtis, thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic. This is just such a vital element in our classrooms, but we know that, but often we just need to be reminded. Parents are such an important part. We partner with them, but are we really partnering with them? So what you have shared has just been such a great challenge. I appreciate it. I know you're so busy, but I really appreciate you giving us some time to be with us today.
Sure. Well, I thank you for having me and for inviting me. I love doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you also for joining us. I hope you were challenged and encouraged in your relationship with the families of the students God has entrusted to you. So, you may be thinking, well, we're already halfway through the school year. Nope, it is never too late to start. Or maybe you did well with connecting with families at the start of the year and you've just kind of become buried in logistics, those day-to-day teacher things. This focus has to be intentional. So let's make it a priority, even starting today. As we sign off for today, don't forget to go to teachereditionpodcast.com to learn more about the show and also submit your questions for upcoming episodes. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. Now, once again, it's time to get back to your day, but it's not just any day. Every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Now, go do what God has called you to do.